There comes a moment in a woman's life when silence is no longer a habit but a shield. It is the moment she stops speaking to be understood and starts speaking only where she is safe. And here is the strange question no one ever asks. What if the quietest woman in the room is not emotionally closed off at all, but the one who learned the hardest way that honesty can have consequences? Silence does not begin as a personality trait. It begins as protection. It begins after the third or fourth time she tried to express her feelings and someone called her dramatic. It begins after she said, "That hurt me," and the other person laughed. It begins after she tried to explain her needs, and instead of being heard, she was judged. Slowly, the nervous system starts to record these moments like emotional fingerprints. Her mind remembers the reactions. Her body remembers the disappointment. Her voice remembers the pain of not being taken seriously. So she adjusts. Not loudly, not suddenly, quietly, like someone rearranging furniture in the middle of the night so they do not wake anyone. She stops finishing her sentences. She lets conversations die before they turn into arguments. She holds back questions that deserve answers. She starts to think something is broken inside her, when the truth is the opposite. She is not malfunctioning. She is adapting. She is choosing self-protection over self-exposure. Her silence is not a flaw. It is evidence of intelligence. And this is where the misunderstanding begins. People assume she is easygoing. They assume she is chill, low maintenance, unbothered. They think the quiet means she has nothing to say. In reality, she is carrying entire speeches inside her, rehearsed and never spoken. They do not see her lying awake at night, replaying conversations and wishing she had trusted herself enough to speak. They do not see the emotional cost of being the calm one. They do not see that silence is not her natural state. It is her learned, survival instinct. Carl Jung believed the psyche protects what the world cannot hold, so when the world mishandles her voice, the psyche guards it. Her silence becomes a room inside her where she can think and feel without punishment. She may look distant on the outside, but inside, she is trying to decide who has earned access to her truth. She is not hiding. She is filtering. She is not weak. She is recovering. And once you understand silence as protection, a deeper question rises to the surface. Not, why does she not speak up? But something far more revealing. When did speaking up start to feel dangerous for her? That is where the story truly begins, opening the door to what comes next beneath her silence. It often begins in the smallest moments, moments most people would never notice. You try to share a feeling and someone sighs. You ask a question and someone rolls their eyes. You speak honestly and someone calls you sensitive or dramatic. It is not the words alone that wound you. It is the tone, the shift, the atmosphere, the quiet message beneath it all that says, your truth is an inconvenience. That is the moment the body starts to learn that honesty has a price. For many women, this moment happened long before adulthood. It may have been a parent who told you to stop crying because nothing is wrong, or a family member who said you were overreacting before they ever asked what you actually felt, or a partner who called every emotional need an attack. Maybe it was a friend group that joked about your vulnerabilities like they were entertainment. The message was subtle but powerful. Your emotions are too heavy for others to hold, so carry them alone. And so the nervous system begins to negotiate with survival. It slowly rewires itself away from honesty and toward safety. You start editing sentences before they leave your mouth. You practice conversations in your head before you ever speak them. You wait for the right moment, the right mood, the right tone, the right version of the other person, and the right emotional weather that never seems to arrive. Speaking becomes something you rehearse, not something you live. Real-life examples appear everywhere. You hesitate before hitting send on a text message. You delete a paragraph 3 times before settling for a polite sentence that betrays how you actually feel. You start conversations with, "I know this sounds stupid, but," even when it is not stupid at all. You apologize before you have even expressed a need. You speak in a soft voice in rooms where your silence ends up being louder than your words ever were. Inside, something begins to split. There is the version of you that wants to speak, and the version of you that has learned not to. One remembers who you are. The other remembers what it cost to show her. And at some point, it becomes easier to say nothing at all. Silence becomes a shelter. Not because you are weak, but because you are protecting something sacred. Because the voice you silence today is the same voice that was dismissed years ago. This is why speaking up now feels so much larger than a conversation. It feels like you are defying every memory that once taught you to be quiet. It feels like you are walking into a room with trembling hands, carrying the child you used to be. It feels like the fear is not happening now, but is happening still. It feels like you are not just talking to a person, you are talking to your past. So you learn to start small. You practice honesty in tiny, gentle doses. You use an opener that makes space instead of conflict. I want to tell you something important. I do not need fixing, I just need you to listen. This is not a demand. It is not a confrontation. It is an invitation back to connection. Because once speaking starts to feel dangerous, something else begins to happen. You stop checking in with yourself and start checking the room instead. You measure safety by expressions, posture, tone, silence, tension, and mood, and that is where the next pattern begins. It is no longer about what you feel. It becomes about who you might upset if you say it. And that realization leads directly into what comes next. The moment you start studying everyone's emotions but can no longer hear your own. There comes a point where you stop entering rooms as yourself and start entering them like a radar. You do not greet people first. You scan them. You pay attention to micro-expressions, the energy between sentences, the way someone sets their cup down, and the silence after a question. You read the emotional temperature before you decide how warm or cold you are allowed to be. It looks like intuition from the outside. Inside, it feels like survival. For many women, this habit began in childhood without ever being consciously chosen. Maybe home was unpredictable and each day depended on someone else's mood. If a parent was tense, you learned to stay quiet. If someone was irritated, you became useful. If someone was sad, you became comforting. If someone was angry, you became invisible. You were reading the room before you even knew how to read words. That is how emotional surveillance begins, not as a gift, but as training. Real life makes this pattern easier to see. You can feel the shift in a friend's tone before they admit something is wrong. You notice that someone is withdrawing before they send fewer messages. You sense that an argument is coming before anyone raises their voice. You know what people need before they say it, but cannot explain why you never learned to ask what you need. You can tell when someone is hurt, even if they say they are fine, yet when you are hurt, you cannot speak at all. And while others might admire it as insight, the cost is hidden. When you are always scanning the emotional weather outside yourself, your inner climate becomes unfamiliar. You can tell who in the room is carrying sadness, but you cannot tell if you are. You can name tension across the table, but not tension in your chest. You feel responsible for keeping the peace, but forget to ask if peace exists inside you. It is like living with the volume turned up on everyone else and muted on yourself. This is where the nervous system quietly confuses safety with self-abandonment. You begin adjusting your personality to prevent other people's reactions. You hold back comments to avoid discomfort. You change your tone so no one feels challenged. You smile so no one has to confront what they did. You give reassurance that no one asked to earn. Bit by bit, the room becomes louder than your own voice. The climax of this pattern is simple but painful. You know what everyone feels except you. You have learned to manage the energy around you, but not the energy within you. You can rescue the mood of a space, but you cannot soothe the ache in your own chest. You have protected relationships, but not your own emotional home. So the practice begins small. Before you analyze the room, before you scan the faces, before you shrink to fit what is needed, ask yourself one quiet question. What am I feeling right now, even if it is messy? Name one emotion, not the most socially acceptable one, the real one, confused, tired, angry, lonely, overwhelmed, numb. Whatever it is, let it exist without apologizing for it. Because when you cannot hear your own feelings clearly, something else happens. A new reflex takes shape. The next pattern emerges. You start apologizing for emotions that are not even wrong, and that is where the story continues. Not with silence, but with self-blame disguised as politeness. Something strange happens when you spend years monitoring other people's emotions instead of your own. You begin to apologize for things that are not wrong. You start saying, "I am sorry," before you have even identified what you feel. You apologize for being confused. You apologize for needing clarity. You apologize for emotions that make perfect sense once someone knows the full story. The apology becomes automatic, like breathing. You do not choose it, your nervous system does. It usually begins in small, subtle moments. You ask a partner to explain something, and they sigh. You share something important, and someone says you are too sensitive. You ask for reassurance, and someone laughs like you are being dramatic. These responses train the body like conditioning. The message is not spoken directly, but it is received clearly. Other people's comfort matters more than your emotional truth. Over time, the mind absorbs it as a rule of survival, so you adapt. You start softening your sentences before they even leave your mouth. You say, "I am sorry, this is stupid," before expressing a boundary. You say, "I know I am probably overreacting," before describing what hurt you. You say, "Never mind, it does not matter," even though it does. You shrink your inner world so no one has to confront their behavior. You make yourself small to keep the peace. It looks polite on the outside. Inside, it feels like erasure. Real life makes this pattern unmistakable. You rehearse texts 5 times just to avoid sounding needy. You rewrite your feelings to sound lighter so no one pulls away. You practice conversations in your head because you want to get it right, even when you are the one who was hurt. You say, "I am sorry," when someone else is the one who crossed the line. You ask for permission to feel. You say sorry for crying. You say sorry for the silence. You say sorry for needing time. Eventually, apologizing becomes a mask you wear so no one sees how often you are bleeding. This is the painful climax of the pattern. The apology becomes a shield you use against the fear of rejection. Not because you believe you are wrong, but because you fear what will happen if you act like you are right. The apology becomes a way of whispering, "Please do not leave. I will make it easier. I will make myself quieter. I will take up less space." Your hurt turns inward and becomes self-blame instead of communication. But here is the truth hidden underneath all the apologizing. Your feelings are not wrong. Your needs are not a burden. Your voice is not an inconvenience. Your emotions are not a mess to clean up for someone else's comfort. So the shift starts with a sentence that honors your humanity without collapsing into guilt. The next time you feel the apology rising in your throat, replace it with this: I am feeling something important. I just need a moment to understand it. That sentence does not accuse. It does not apologize. It protects your dignity without abandoning your sensitivity, because if you spend long enough apologizing for existing, something else eventually happens. You do not just apologize for your feelings. You begin to disappear from the story before anyone gets the chance to push you out. And that is where the next chapter quietly begins. At a certain point, silence stops being a reaction and becomes a strategy. You start to pull away before you even know what you are protecting yourself from. Instead of saying what hurt, you shorten your sentences. Instead of asking for clarity, you lower your expectations. Instead of sharing how you feel, you promise yourself you can handle it alone. You become low maintenance, easygoing, undemanding, and little by little, invisible. It is not that you do not care. It is that your fear of rejection has learned to move faster than your hope for connection. It shows up in small moments that most people will never notice. You type out a message and delete it because you do not want to seem emotional. You decide not to call because you do not want to be a burden. You convince yourself it is not that serious, even though your chest feels heavy. You pretend you are fine, so no one has to deal with the version of you that feels complicated. You shrink your presence to avoid becoming an obligation. Real life makes this pattern painfully clear. You feel yourself becoming quieter around people who used to feel safe. You stop making plans because you do not know if they want you there or if you are inviting yourself. You stop asking questions because you are afraid of the answers. You start saying, whatever is easier for you, even when it is not easier for you at all. You trade honesty for survival. You trade connection for protection. You start to leave rooms emotionally long before your body ever walks out. The fear underneath it all is simple and brutal. If you speak honestly, they might leave. If you ask for what you need, they might change how they see you. If you show the full truth, someone might decide they are done. So you leave first, not physically, not dramatically, but quietly. You detach, you soften, you disappear. You convince yourself it is wisdom when really it is fear wearing armor. This is the climax of the pattern. Disappearing becomes a form of self-defense. If no one gets close enough to see you, then no one gets close enough to reject you. You begin to believe that absence is protection. You start to think that not needing anything makes you strong. And in some ways, it did save you once. It kept you from begging. It kept you from staying where you were not valued. It taught you how to survive environments that did not know how to hold you. But survival is not the same as healing. And disappearing is not the same as being safe, because every time you choose invisibility, something inside you becomes harder to find. Your voice fades from your own ears. Your needs go unnamed. Your heart begins to ache for something it cannot even articulate. Silence protects you, but it also keeps you painfully alone. So the shift begins with a small sentence, not a confrontation, not an argument, just a boundary that holds your humanity without abandoning your fear. Instead of vanishing, try this. I need a little space to process this. I will talk when I feel more ready. It does not attack. It does not apologize. It simply keeps you in the story without sacrificing your safety. And it is here, in this quiet middle ground between silence and expression, that another truth starts to rise like a voice clearing its throat. Disappearing may feel safe, but connection is what heals. That realization opens the door to what comes next, where silence is still present, but it is no longer the only place you know how to live. There comes a moment when silence is no longer just a reaction, but a shelter you built with your own hands. It held you through storms no one knew you were standing in. It kept peace in rooms where honesty started fires. It protected you from people who would have twisted your words instead of hearing them. Silence was not weakness. It was intelligence. It was survival. It was the armor you reached for when you had nothing else. But here is where the story shifts. The same silence that once saved you now begins to feel like a room with no doors. You want to be understood, but every time you try to speak, something tightens in your throat. You want connection, but your body pulls you back into the familiar doorway of withdrawal. You want someone to know you, but you have spent so long disappearing that you no longer know how to step forward. The survival strategy is still working, but the life you want cannot begin from inside a bunker. You can see it in daily life. A friend asks if you are okay, and you answer with automatic surface phrases like, "I am fine," even though something is breaking inside your chest. Someone tries to get close, and you feel the urge to pull away because needing them feels dangerous. You rehearse your emotions in your head instead of speaking them out loud. You turn a connection into a private performance no one else ever gets to see. What used to protect you now exhausts you, and yet letting go of silence feels like stepping outside without skin. The climax of this pattern is not dramatic. It is quietly heartbreaking. You start to realize that you have built a life where no one truly knows when you are hurting. People praise you for being strong without realizing they are clapping for a version of you that is barely holding on. You are admired for independence when in reality you were never given the option to rely on anyone. You were trained to be the fireproof one, the uncomplaining one, the woman who knows how to carry the weight without asking who handed it to her. So healing does not start with loud confessions or perfect conversations. Healing starts with choosing one safe person or one safe moment where your voice is allowed to exist without being punished. It sounds like, "Hey, I am not ready to explain everything, but I do not want to carry this alone." That sentence is a doorway, not a demand, not a breakdown. Just a small opening that allows air to enter the places where you have been holding your breath for years. You do not have to tell your whole story. You do not have to justify your pain. You do not have to convince anyone to understand you. You only have to stop disappearing long enough for someone real to stand next to you. Because when you taste what safe connection feels like for the first time, something shifts at the soul level. Silence no longer feels like the only room you belong in. It becomes something you can choose, not something you are trapped inside. It stops being a reflex and starts becoming a boundary. It stops being armor and starts becoming a decision. And that shift is what prepares you for the next step, where silence is no longer about fear, but about peace. Something changes when silence stops being the place you hide and becomes the place you rest. It is subtle at first. You start noticing where your voice is welcomed and where it is only tolerated. You begin to hear the difference between someone who wants to understand you and someone who only wants you quiet. You start to understand that explaining yourself to someone who has already decided not to listen is a form of self-abandonment. Little by little, silence shifts from fear to clarity, from reflex to intention. In this stage, you are not silent because you have nothing to say. You are silent because not everyone has earned access to your inner world. You learn to measure conversations not by volume, but by safety. You pause before pouring your heart into unprepared hands. You take time before answering a message that demands a part of you you can no longer afford to give away for free. Silence becomes a doorway back to yourself, not an exile from connection. Real-life examples. become proof of how far you have come. A person speaks to you with disrespect, and instead of defending yourself until your voice shakes, you simply exit the interaction. Someone tries to bait you into an argument, and instead of rushing to prove your point, you choose peace over performance. You no longer feel the need to narrate your pain to people who have shown they cannot hold it. You stop auditioning for love that asks you to shrink. There is power in protecting what is sacred inside you. The climax of this transformation is not dramatic, it is grounded. You begin to realize that silence and voice are not opposites, they are partners. Sometimes your healing sounds like speaking your truth out loud. Sometimes your healing sounds like saying nothing at all. Both are valid, both are part of your maturity. So you carry new sentences with you, not as shields, but as reminders of who you are becoming. My feelings are not a problem to fix. I am allowed to exist without shrinking. I can be quiet for peace, not for fear. These are not slogans, they are thresholds. Each one is a doorway to a version of you who does not disappear to make others comfortable. Each one is a reminder that the goal was never to stop speaking, but to stop bleeding your truth into places that cannot receive it. And now, the closing invitation. Do you recognize yourself in any of these patterns of going quiet? Tell me which part felt most like your story, and we will unpack it together in the next video. Because this journey does not end with silence. It begins with choosing when and for whom your voice will rise again. If this touched something sacred inside you, don't let it fade into silence. Like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Your presence here is not just support, it's resonance. And if you feel moved to give back, your donation becomes a quiet but powerful gesture that helps keep this light alive for others still walking in the dark.